If you've got a saltwater pool, then you don't need to regularly add chlorine to your water, but you still need to add some chemicals. I'm Matt from Swim University, and here are 5 things you're going to want to keep on hand: Chlorine Stabilizer, Muriatic acid, baking soda, Chlorine Shock, and of course, salt. And there's one chemical you're going to want to avoid altogether. Now, before we get into each chemical, you need to remember one thing. A saltwater pool is still a chlorine pool. Your saltwater generator makes chlorine from the salt in your water. So you don't have a chemical-free pool, you're just adding salt once or twice a year instead of adding chlorine every single week. And your water still needs to be balanced, and that chlorine still needs to be protected. So here's what you'll need to add. The first chemical is Chlorine Stabilizer. Now, Chlorine Stabilizer is also called cyanuric acid, or CYA, or pool conditioner. That has many names. And what it does is it protects the chlorine from breaking down in the sunlight. Now, it's naturally found in chlorine tablets, trichlor, and chlorine granules, dichlor. But since you're not using those in your saltwater pool, the chlorine that your saltwater pool is creating is not protected. And that means your generator is going to work overtime to keep producing the chlorine that breaks down once it's in the water. So you're going to need to add CYA directly to your water. And it's usually sold again as Chlorine Stabilizer or pool conditioner. Compared to other chemicals, CYA barely breaks down in the water. You'll lose about 10 parts per million per month. So don't overdo the initial dose. Instead, test this level monthly and add cyanuric acid maybe once a month or even less. Saltwater pools do well with CYA between 60 and 80 parts per million, which is a bit higher than the standard range. Now, that higher level takes the pressure off your salt cell, especially during peak sun exposure. But don't worry, we've got a full video on CYA if you want more help adding this to your water. The next chemical you need is muriatic acid, or pH decreaser. Now, when your salt system runs, it naturally raises your pH. If you're testing your levels once a week, you've probably noticed chronically high pH levels, and that's why you're going to need muriatic acid or pH decreaser on hand. These both work the same, so use whatever you find easier. Muriatic acid is a bit more hazardous to handle, so that's why I like pH decreaser. It's a dry acid. You want to test and adjust your pH every single week, since high pH can cause scaling on your saltwater cell. Now, if you'd rather not guess at when to add chemicals and how much you need to add, you can try using the Pool Care app. It builds you a custom treatment plan based on your actual test results. Just enter your numbers and it'll tell you exactly what to add to your water. And yes, it works for saltwater pools. There's a 7-day free trial if you want to see if it's right for you. Just search Swim University in the App Store or click one of the links below. The third chemical you need is baking soda. Now, baking soda raises your total alkalinity. This is sodium bicarbonate. Your total alkalinity helps to keep your pH stable, acting as a buffer to prevent the pH from fluctuating up and down. Now, you'll still get naturally high pH with your saltwater pool, so you won't need to add it as often, but of course it's baking soda, it's good to have on hand. Baking soda has the same active ingredient as alkalinity increaser, which is sodium bicarbonate. So you can use either one of these chemicals, but of course, baking soda is usually cheaper. Now, keep your total alkalinity between 80 and 120 parts per million, and check this level when you check your pH every single week. Now, the next chemical you need is Chlorine Shock, either liquid chlorine or dichlor shock. Now, sometimes your salt cell can't produce enough chlorine to meet the demand. So this can happen after a storm, after you have a lot of swimmers in your pool, during an algae outbreak, or when it's extremely hot outside and your saltwater generator is working overtime. So if you need to boost your chlorine levels, you can add liquid chlorine or dichlor shock. The superchlorinate button or the boost button on your salt system works too, but manually adding some extra chlorine helps to relieve some of the burden. But I would avoid using cal hypo shock because this has calcium in it. Cal hypo stands for calcium hypochlorite. And if you add this to your water too often, that calcium can build up in your salt cell. And that means your generator has to work even harder than it needs to. Now, the other really obvious chemical you need is salt. Yes, a saltwater pool needs salt. Luckily, you don't need to add it that often. As your generator turns salt into chlorine, or technically hypochlorous acid, that salt is recycled back into the water where it can turn into chlorine again. So you only need to top off your levels like once or twice a year. And you can check out our pool salt calculator, which is linked below, if you need help calculating exactly how much salt to add to your pool. Finally, here are a few optional chemicals that you may or may not need. Number 1 is pH increaser. Yes, this raises your pH if it ever dips too low. Now, you'll likely deal with high pH more often, but it's worth knowing what to grab if you have low pH. Baking soda also also raises your pH, but it'll raise your alkalinity along with it. Calcium hardness increaser. Now this helps if you have really soft water. You'll see this as a total hardness reading on your test strips or your test kit, and the right amount of calcium hardness protects your surfaces and your equipment from pitting, etching, and corrosion. But too much calcium can damage surfaces, especially fiberglass pools and salt cells. I recommend checking out our video on calcium hardness if you're just unsure about this one. Stain and scale preventer. Now this helps if you have hard water or water with too much calcium, too much minerals, or metals. This stops that mineral buildup on your salt cell and your pool surfaces. Now you only need it if your total hardness levels on your test strips or your test kit are too high, or you know that you have copper or iron in your source water, like if you use well water. So now that you know what chemicals you need, what's the actual chemical routine? So you want to top off your salt once or twice a year, usually at the beginning of the season. You can add muriatic acid or pH decreaser when you notice the pH rising, and then test this once a week. Add baking soda to raise your total alkalinity, and it'll also help raise your pH, and test and balance this at the same time as your pH. Add Chlorine Shock when your saltwater generator needs a little bit of a boost, and you can use liquid chlorine or dichlor. Do not use Cal Hypo Shock. Keep your CYA, your cyanuric acid, between 60 and 80 parts per million. Test it once a month, and add Chlorine Stabilizer when those levels start to drop. Now, if you've got low pH or calcium hardness issues, you want to reach for those optional chemicals like I mentioned before. If you want a full routine, including how to start up your salt system for the beginning of the season and salt cell cleaning, you can check out our full saltwater pool maintenance video. Let me know in the comments if there's anything else that you add to your saltwater pool. And if you want to know exactly what chemicals to add to your water and when, check out the Pool Care app just by searching Swim University in either app store. That's the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, or you can search for Pool Care, or you can click the links below. That's it. Thanks for watching, and as always, happy swimming.